About 5% of people who've caught COVID-19 worldwide may end up with long-term issues with their sense of smell or taste. Now, that proportion comes up to some 27 million people. The study was conducted by Singapore, the United Kingdom and US researchers and was published in the influential British Medical Journal. For more, we're joined now by Associate Professor Toh Song Tar. He is head of the Department of Otorhinolaryngology, head and neck surgery at the Singapore General Hospital. Good evening, Professor Toh. Thank you for joining us. The study that was done involved about 3,700 patients from 12 countries. Could you briefly summarize how it was carried out and what the main findings were?
Hi, good evening, Don. So our researchers, Doctors Benjamin Tan, Anwo Ping, Joseph Chow, and Nico Tan, were co-authors of this paper, troll through the published literature and found the studies that you mentioned, and we devised a model that looked at how smell and taste progress in patients with COVID-19. And what we found was that, like you mentioned, about 5% of the affected patients may have persistent loss of sense of smell and taste in the long run.
So the study tracked patients up to 30 days post-infection. Does 30 days, that period of time, qualify, or does it count as long-term?
Well, actually, that model that we came up with is more than 30 days. So it goes up to 6 months. So, and the study shows that, if you have COVID and you don't recover by 6 months, chances are that you might not recover your sense of smell or taste. And even if it does, it may be altered. So that is the beauty of the model, because nobody has got a study that's that long, but this model was able to predict what this sense of smell and taste persistence will do. And in fact, some of the studies published recently did show that this model correctly predicted that persistence of this dysfunction in this group of patients.
So on the issue of vaccination status, because this is something that's been drummed into us, right, about if we get our full vaccination sort of regimen, did that status impact the results that you saw in terms of the severity or the duration of the problems that these patients were experiencing?
Well, our studies didn't look specifically at that, but there are studies to show that post-vaccination, patients tend to get less severe loss of sense of taste and smell, similarly like what they would experience with vaccination and severe illness. But we did studies also show that the different strains actually can impact its effect on smell and taste. For example, the Alpha and Delta strain seems to affect the sense of smell and taste more than the Omicron strain. But with the huge number of patients that have Omicron, we're also looking at a huge number of patients with persistent loss of sense of smell and taste in the long run.
And were these patients that were tracked, were they ordinary otherwise, or did they have perhaps conditions that predispose them to having long COVID?
Well, generally, they are healthy patients other than having COVID. But what we found is that females tends to have seems to be more affected by this, and tends to recover less compared to the male counterpart.
So we have become used to hearing this issue. I was going to ask you about the issue of long-term loss of smell and taste, because we've gotten used to this, the fact that we know that there may be some impact on smell and taste, but what do we know about people regaining their sense of smell and taste eventually?
Well, we know that most of the people will regain their sense of smell and taste, about 95%, but therein the 5% may not. And so this is a problem with long-term loss of sense of smell and taste is that, well, it's been associated with poorer quality of life, depression, malnutrition, because the food doesn't taste and smell as nice. And some studies have even shown cognitive decline as well as increased mortality in this group of patients. And we know that without the sense of taste and smell, patients are more likely to get food poisoning, experience fire hazard, especially if they are cooking or ironing because they're not able to smell the burnt the smell.
Yeah, that's a good point. You don't really realize, the implications, one of the severity of what might happen. But in instances like that, Professor, are our medical institutions equipped to cope with those other sort of conditions that arise because of the loss of sense of taste and smell, like the depression you mentioned and so on?
Well, definitely, we have trained medical professions that are able to tackle those problems that arose as a result of this loss of sense of smell. But because of the sheer number of patients that are involved, I think we need to perhaps get them to be more aware of this and come forth for help and treatment if they do experience this problem in their daily life.
Professor Toh, thank you very much. We've been speaking there on all things long COVID with Associate Professor Toh Song Tar from Singapore General Hospital.